Hi, and welcome to the Drama Free Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Jess Cording. Wow, this is, I don't know, there's a side of me that thought I would not be recording this episode when I am, but I like to believe that things happen at the time that they're supposed to happen, and it's really up to us to listen to those inner pulls and to not question too much. And I've been thinking for a while now about how to share this because it matters to me, to say it honestly. Like, I really always like to be transparent and to present what I want to share in the most authentic light possible. So I've been kind of thinking about the best way to do that. And so today's episode is all about why I'm hitting pause on this podcast for now. And it's not because I don't care about it. It's not because I feel like it's been a failure at all, but just because my life has changed so much since I started this podcast in 2019. And I need some space to listen more closely to what comes next. Before I was a parent, I carried a lot of fear about being perceived as someone who gave up parts of her career after having a child. And it goes further back than that too. Like, I can remember being a child and worrying that people would think I was less than for quitting something. Like, there was a time when I was 12 years old and I was playing 4 different musical instruments. I was the lead part in the school play. I was getting straight A's, and I felt like I had to uphold all of that at that young age. Like, what the hell? And that there have definitely been elements of that that have followed me into adulthood. And I've been working in the last few years on getting better at spotting those patterns when they come up. And no, it started to dawn on me well over a year ago, before we even knew that Iris was coming, that this podcast was starting to fall under that category for me. I started to question, and I'll share a little bit more about this, the why of it. And because as things change, our reasons for doing things change, what we need changes. But I found that I was struggling to really decide when and how to hit pause, because there was still this element of not wanting people to think less of me for giving something up, like after becoming a parent. I also almost didn't record this episode because there's this side of me that also was worried that people would think it was like self-indulgent to announce that I'm taking a break. Like, who cares? Who gives a, right? Like, and I think that, I mean, maybe that's true, but like, the older I get, the more I remind myself that it's better when we don't care so much what other people think. That's just a waste of energy. You can't control what other people think. It's a waste of time. I had an experience when I was giving my notice at a clinical job, and I'm not going to share how recently or how long ago it was because I don't want to throw shade, but I had been feeling for a long time. And here's another example. I had been wanting to leave for a couple of years. And then I made a plan. I told myself I was going to leave in a year. And then I started planning that. And when I finally gave my notice, the person said to me, they were like, well, it's a free service. That's part of their care. Like, no one's going to miss it. And I remember wanting to say, well, thank you for telling me everything I needed to know about making the right choice. If that was how little I was valued in that realm. But yeah, a story for another day. So there's this side of me that I think still is like, yeah, why does anyone care? Why should they care? And hey, maybe you're listening to this, you're like, I really don't care. Just get to the meat. Talk to me here. Like, let's prioritize the protein of this episode. So yeah, I'm going to get to it. But over the past year, especially as we prepared to welcome Iris, I started paying closer attention to how I was spending my time and how those choices actually felt. Not just like, oh, is this productive? Is this bringing in income? But also like energetically, how did it feel? And what I realized that what I need right now, it isn't a rebrand or a refresh, it's a pause. Again, like I said, I've always had this fear of being seen as a quitter. I've always had this, maybe one day I'll understand where this comes from, but this tendency to stay in things to maintain a status quo long past when it's serving me or those who are also involved. I have this tendency to compare myself to people who seem like they can handle it all and do so much more than I can. And that fear really, in some cases, has kept me going longer than alignment did. And I didn't want to get to that point. And I think as our lives change, it's important to take stock, right? And see what's working, see what's not. For me, it wasn't just parenthood shifting how my time and energy feel, but of course, that is a huge piece of the picture. And I'm very curious what me 5 years from now will have to say about this phase of my life, because oh my gosh, it is like so many emotions, so many things, trying to figure it out as you go. And yeah, it's definitely been a season even more intensely reevaluating what actually serves the bigger picture. I've also been working on letting go of the idea that everything must be sustained forever. Like I said, this is challenging for me. Maybe it has to do with my OCD. Maybe there's some thread there. Maybe it's just like type A dietitian shit. But I found that for myself, clarity has often come from noticing and not forcing. And as I was looking at my business and certain things in my life, I realized that I had been trying to force quite a number of things for a number of years. And I've been coming to a place where I don't want to do that. Forcing doesn't work. You don't need me to tell you that, right? I'm sure you've had experiences in your own life where you've tried to force something and you're like, why is this not happening? And I found for myself, not only was forcing not working, but I was finding that the things I was trying to force weren't even things I wanted. They were things I thought I should be doing because on paper they seemed like the next natural step. But everything about it felt wrong to me. I was like praying for, on some subconscious level, I was like praying for it not to work out so I could have more space for other things that do light me up. And that was really telling. Podcasting, like, I love it. I love talking to people. I do really enjoy interviews. I love learning from people. I also love, if I'm doing solo episodes, I love storytelling. It's one of my favorite ways of communicating. It's one of my favorite types of media to consume. But the truth is that also running a podcast takes a lot of time, energy. If you hire a producer and or someone to help you with promoting it after the fact, like that also has a financial cost that has to be factored in. There's all this invisible labor of, planning, researching, editing, promotion, and I think it's really important that if you do have a podcast, it is serving the bigger picture of your brand. And I was starting to come to this place, and maybe you've noticed this in recent years, maybe not, but I felt like I was getting to a place where I was losing the thread. I was starting to question myself, like, okay, why, like, what is the intention behind this content that I'm sharing? How is it all tying together? How is it serving the bigger picture? And I didn't have a good answer for that. I considered doing a rebrand with a more specific niche, but I found that when I took some time off for maternity leave over the summer of 2025 and I didn't record any new content, I just re-released some old episodes, like it felt really good to not be spending all that time planning, creating, and promoting. I really believe that good work should support your life, right? Not quietly drain it. And in the past year or two, I really had to get honest with myself about, was the podcast adding to the picture, or was it just another place I was sending my energy? And sometimes that can be really fun and expressive, but then there are other times when it may not be serving you that well. I think something I have also had to be very specific with for myself, and this has gotten a little bit easier after I was officially diagnosed with ADHD and OCD and started to understand that some of my tendencies to just run towards something or to like keep something in motion have a lot to do with my neurodivergence and just the way that my brain works. But choosing intention over momentum, that is the thing I have been really focused on in the last couple of years, but especially in the last year since knowing that we were going to be welcoming our daughter. So there have been a lot of behind the scenes shifts in my business in terms of how I'm spending my time. I've been leaning a lot more into the media, the speaking, the brand work, communications, that side of my work. In 2025, I launched a new side business offering tarot card reading, something that has been a part of my life for 25 years, more than 25 years, which sounds crazy. And I used to do tarot reading as like a side job years and years ago because it was fun. I loved it. I loved that way of connecting with people. And I was a little surprised in 2025 when I felt called to introduce that into my professional life as an adult, but it felt so good, and that's been a really fun thing I've been doing. That fits together for me. Like that is very much aligned with my mind, body, spirit approach to wellness. I was like, wow, like if this is what feels really good right now, like I need to think about, just take stock and see like how everything fits together. And just also, I've been doing more creative work in the last year. I felt really called to make space for that. I used to write tons of fiction. I've even published, and I've shared this, but I've published lots of like fiction and poetry and things under other names. And I got to a place where I was like, well, what if I would do that under my own name? What would that look like? How would I free up space for that? And as I'm standing here recording this podcast for you guys, to be totally honest, right now that looks like me up really, really early before the baby gets up, walking on my walking pad, writing on my phone, like in like a note or like a Google Doc or something. Like that's when that has been coming up. But it's all about making space. That is a theme that has been on my mind. And with the podcast, I really enjoyed the experience of like that feeling of momentum, right? When you like do this interview and that interview and you're promoting this and you're recording that, and it can be really, really enticing and addictive almost. That little high of like just like putting it, like doing that work. But momentum alone is not necessarily a reason to keep going. I think it is very important to be intentional. And what I really want to do is think about, okay, if when I return to this, how is it going to be fitting into the bigger picture of how I'm serving people? What am I going to be sharing on here that is going to offer value and help better other people's lives? And I really want to get clear on that. Instead of just putting out content for the sake of maintaining a particular schedule that I've been maintaining for the past almost 7 years. 7 years is a long time, right? And I also think it's really important that we make time and space to listen for guidance. That is a theme for me in 2026, is making space to listen more to my intuition. Like I always know it's there. It's this little pilot light that's always lit. It's always there for me to pay attention to. But I've been feeling called to make a little more space to pay attention to it and to really do the types of work and projects that don't make it harder for me to tune into that. So for me, a lot of the work that is really aligned with maintaining a good balance is things where I can set my own schedule. I also find that things like speaking, writing, content creation, and collaboration, media work, like that stuff, it feels very aligned. And when I'm doing more of that work, I can hear better. And I've had to streamline some other things to make extra space for that. I mentioned that tarot cards have been a part of my own life for a very long time. I've used it as a reflective tool, almost like a meditative tool, if you will. I don't really think that tarot is, and I probably talked about this on the podcast at some point, but I don't feel like it's about like telling the future, right? I think it's really about getting insight on how you really feel about something. Like I strongly believe that your reaction to the cards tells you just as much as the actual card itself, if not more. And I found that when I sat with the cards and I was asking what I should do about the podcast, should I pause it now? Should I wind it down at a later date and kind of get there? Right away, some of the cards I got the Hanged Man, which is all about taking a pause, letting something go, taking time to, like a timeout to plan. I got other cards that reflected that very similar message, and I was like, okay, that's really obvious, cool. But I noticed that my reaction was immense relief, and that was telling. I think that sometimes when you let something go on too long, I didn't want to get to a point where listeners could tell I was exhausted. I mean, I'm a new mom as I'm recording this. Of course I'm exhausted. Like even when I sleep enough, I'm exhausted. It's just how things are right now. But I didn't want there to ever be a visible or audible, if you're listening to an audio version, like sense of fatigue or like I had lost the spark for this. I didn't want to get there. And yeah, I realize I'm stopping on episode 249. I'm like, why didn't you just go to 250? But that's not what this is about. It's really about intention and being intentional, making decisions that are based on what is actually going to be the best instead of just what you think you should be doing. So I just, like I said, I started this podcast in 2019. It was pre-COVID New York. I was living in a studio apartment. I was so single, so many fewer responsibilities. So I can't pretend that life hasn't changed. Like things are very, very different in so many wonderful ways. So much better than I could have planned it. I look back at what I wanted and thought my life would look like when I would think about the future back then, and it's so different. And I'm so grateful for all of the surprises. And I think something can be meaningful and still complete for now. I'm so grateful that I've gotten to do so many of the things that I have, and I'm grateful for the things I'm going to get to do, even if I don't know what a lot of them are yet. Some I do, but some are going to be surprises, and that's cool. I don't know exactly what comes next for this podcast. I might miss it and return much sooner than I expect. It might be much longer. For the first time, maybe ever in my adult life, I'm okay not knowing. I mean, you can still find me all over the place. You can connect with me on Substack, jessicacording.substack.com, or if you're into the tarot stuff, I'm at teaandorangestarot.substack.com. You'll find me on social media. You'll see my books, my articles. I'm still giving talks in a variety of settings, working with brands, showing up in the media. Like, this is not me disappearing. This is me making space. So if you're listening to this and it resonates with you, I hope it gives you permission to pause on something too. And I think you know what it is, without making it feel like you failed at something. Sometimes listening and making time to listen, that's the most productive thing we can do. So, yeah, this is not farewell forever. Like I said, I'm still around. I will link to all the places you can find me. But this is a pause. This is a little pause to plan what comes next, to make space for all the good things ahead. And I just want to thank you so much for being here. I know that some of you have been listening since day one. Some of you guys who are newer, please feel free to go back through the archives and listen to the old episodes. It's been a journey, and wow, I'm just, like I said, I'm so grateful. It's the incredible conversations I've gotten to have with experts on here, the opportunities to tell stories and share information that I hope you have found helpful. That's just been such a privilege and a joy. So, as always, thank you so much for being here. And may not be on this specific podcast for a while, but you know where to find me. We'll talk soon.